Well, happy Memorial Day, everyone. I hope you've had a good weekend and are enjoying your day off, which I'm hoping all of you have a day off today to spend with your family and friends. We'll be swimming and barbecuing here shortly, but I wanted to make sure I checked in with everyone. Uh, Good news, quiz. Everyone that has attempted the quiz got 100%, so that means hopefully that both you and I are doing something right. So pat yourselves on the back there. There's no need to review that. Bad news, many of you have still not submitted your outlines from last week, so make sure that you get those in ASAP so that I can get those graded and back to you so that you can apply any of that feedback to your theory application papers that are due this week. I'll be looking at your reflections as well from last week, and I think all of you at this point, got your images submitted. A couple of you were a little late on that, but try and stick with it timing wise. I know you got to have good time management here to make sure we get all this in, but be looking for those outlines. I'm hoping, my goal is to get them all back by Wednesday. That's my goal, but give me till Friday at the very latest. That way you would have the weekend to apply any feedback. And because I want you to really focus on that theory application paper this week, there is no quiz. So that's a little extra time even for you to focus on that paper. I want stellar papers, and I believe all of you are completely capable of that from what I have seen so far. So a few things. At the end of this week, if you would please take this mid-course evaluation survey. It's completely anonymous. You just hit the link, and it's basically the same questions that you would get on your course eval at the end of the course. I like doing one mid-course because it lets me kind of gauge where we're at, if there are things that I need to work on, or just to make sure we're all kind of on the same page. So it would literally take you about 2 minutes. So if you wouldn't mind jumping in on and doing that, that would be really helpful for me. Okay, reading this week, we're just reading in the visual culture chapter 8 on photography. Students tend to really like this subject. It's a good one. Photography, very relevant, isn't it, as an art form in today's world. We have a discussion this week since we had our Reflect Journal last week. And after you read that chapter on photography, I've given you a couple of short clips to watch. So there's one on photographer Jeff Wall, and you can watch that by clicking here. And then there's an interview with one of my favorite photographers named Cindy Sherman, if you click here. And this is an episode, it's a whole documentary series, and this is one episode. The section on Cindy Sherman starts at about 15 minutes and 30 seconds and ends at about 34 minutes and 50 seconds. But the whole episode is really great, which I encourage you to watch it, but you only really need for this assignment to view that section where she's being interviewed. And then I want you to answer the following questions. Number one, what is reality, and is reality interpretive? Don't confuse the words reality and truth. Those can possibly be two different things. So I want you to really think of this concept. And the reason we deal with this with photography is in question number 2. Do you believe it is the photographer's job to represent reality? Why or why not use evidence from the text or from these clips to support your opinion? Because when photography came out, it was exhibited in science exhibitions. It wasn't really considered an art form at first, and it has since evolved into that. But there's a lot of interpretation that goes on with the camera, even though we think it's kind of a strict representation, that whole saying, the camera doesn't lie. I want you to think, is that really true? Because there's still a photographer who is giving us a specific perspective, and this chapter in the book is going to talk about this as well. Question number 3, how did Jeff Wall and Cindy Sherman blur the lines of reality in photography? Make sure in these discussion boards that you comment on at least one of your peers' posts. So for example, you may ask them what did they think of these two photographers' work, or if there was something interesting they said. This one is good because I think it can spark up some interesting debate. So try and debate a little bit with your peers in a kind way. Of course, we want to keep everything very considerate of each other's opinions, because this can be a quite opinionated one, and it's pretty fun to see that. And again, make sure that you participate if you want full credit on those assignments. Okay, we have another create assignment this week. Speaking of photography, that's what we're doing. We're doing self-portraits. So you will use a camera to create 3 different self-portraits. You can use anything from a film camera to a high-resolution camera phone. Each image will be accompanied by 3 reflections. These reflections don't need to be long, about 2 to 4 sentences per question is appropriate. Now these must be images you take for this assignment. There's no using last summer's vacation photos. Don't just go through your photo stream and pull pictures. Let's not do selfies where we're just holding the camera and taking a picture of ourselves. Let's think these through. I don't expect you to be professional photographers. However, I expect you to curate these. I expect you to put your best effort in. Use a little creativity here, okay? So your first portrait is going to be about honesty, and the idea of this is to be as honest as possible. Set up a simple background and photograph yourself. You might choose to do this in black and white, you might smile, you might have a straight face, whatever you think is the most kind of vulnerable, honest representation of who you are. And then each one of these you're going to answer some questions. So what makes this portrait an honest representation of who you are? How does this make you feel? Sometimes it makes people feel empowered. Sometimes this honest one makes people feel vulnerable, and consider why. And how might this portrait be an example of this turn of phrase, the camera never lies? In portrait number 2, this is kind of the opposite of the first one. This is going to be an expressive portrait. And so this is to represent your unique personality. So you might put on a costume, photograph yourself in your favorite place, during your favorite hobby. And you may need some help with this one since you're doing self-portraits. You may need someone to actually, hit the shutter button. I want you to set everything up, your lighting, your pose, what's in the background. I want you to frame the shot and make all those, because that's really what the photographer does. If someone else is just clicking the button, you're still the photographer. Okay, so the point of this portrait is to creatively, represent yourself. So again, a few questions. What are you trying to express here? How did this make you feel? And how might this be an example of this whole reality versus imagination debate? Because here you're telling the audience what to think, aren't you? The viewer of this photograph. You're representing yourself in a very specific way. And portrait number 3 is going to be objects. So the idea here is to represent your essence without actually being a picture of your face. You might photograph your hands during some activity, compile your favorite objects together as a still life. Again, really consider lighting, angles, framing the shot. So what's in the shot, what's not in the shot. The point here is to create a more abstract representation of yourself that still captures who you are. And then again, questions. What are you trying to express here? How does this portrait make you feel? And how might this be an example of the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words? So this is going to be done as a blog entry. And actually, I think I ended up changing it. It is still done as a blog, I think. Let me make sure. I may need to change that in the settings. I may end up making it into a discussion board because sometimes students have trouble finding each other's blogs and viewing them. Blackboard can be a little goofy. Regardless, what you need to do is embed your portraits into your entry. You do not need to submit any attachments for this assignment. Please make sure you look at this part. Without fail, I will have someone who just submits attachments. Use the text editor from your written response and be sure to label each image clearly. So I think it was in the first week I showed you how to embed images. Please format written responses by putting the question before the answer. So here's an example of one I did a few years back. So this would be something that would be considered an expressive portrait. We have a little 1988 BMW 325i convertible, and it's, has the odometer and speedometer are broken. It needs a lot of work, but it's a really fun little car, and here we're driving down the interstate, and so I'm trying to express the sense of speed and movement. That's why the picture is blurred. I'm trying to express kind of a carefree afternoon. So you can see how this would be considered an expressive image. So, and you would want to format accordingly. Excuse me, I'm tripping over my words. So please note, again, while I by no means expect you to be professional photographers, I expect you to put some time and thought into these portraits. Make images clear unless you're intentionally blurring them if it's an artistic choice like I've done here. Be creative. Take pride in your work. I can tell the difference between a well thought out portrait and a quick selfie. No quick selfies here, okay? We're doing photography. We're doing curated self-portraits for this assignment. Okay, Moving on to our theory application paper, you should be very familiar with these instructions by now since we've been prepping this for several weeks. I want a 6 to 8 page paper. That's 6 to 8 pages of written text, not 4 or 5 pages of written text with huge images in the middle. You can place your images in your paper wherever you would like, but I want a good solid 6 to 8 pages of 12-point font double-spaced text, okay? So you already know what you're doing. You've selected your abstract, your naturalistic work. You haven't used any examples from the textbook or lectures. You've given proper citations, right? And you should know what we're looking for. So I'm really looking for a deep analysis of Panofsky. I want that primary level to be the briefest one. That's where we should just be exploring the content of the work without using any cultural knowledge. In that secondary level, that's where we're going to use the cultural knowledge we possess already. And then in that intrinsic level is where we're going to look outside of the picture frame or away from the sculpture, and we are going to bring in contextual knowledge, so historical elements, personal elements that the artist might have been going through, what was going on culturally, economically at the time that kind of resulted in this artwork being created and interpreted in a specific way. So really, that's where I want research. Remember from that outline, really dig there. I want you to give me a thorough explanation and examination. Don't leave me a lot of room to ask why, okay? Read through that section and say, is there anywhere where I could say, well, why? Why is this? Make sure you really go through that. So go through that writing styles presentation if you need to again. With Fry, remember that we want to explore this idea of the two kinds of life, the actual and the imaginative. And remember that something that is abstract can actually be a representation of the actual world, because it could be a more realistic representation of an emotional response, for example, and that a naturalistic work can be very imaginative. Think of work like Salvador Dali that has a very naturalistic hand or feel to it, and yet it's completely invented. It's very psychological, right? So make sure that you're considering that. Really dig into those 5 emotional elements of design and always relate that back to the emotional response. Remember, we're comparing and contrasting how 2 completely different styles of artworks done of very similar subject matter can give us a completely different response. So formatting, MLA or APA is fine. Just pick one and stick with it. I want you to have your 2 chosen works embedded into the paper. This can be at the beginning, at the end, it can be in the body of your text. I don't care where it's at, just make sure that you have them in there. Proper citations on those, please. I want 3 different sources of research. One can be the textbook, so make sure you give some good research there. I want citations in the body of the text where appropriate. So if you're paraphrasing, if you're quoting, if you're using research from any source, including the textbook, be sure to give an in-text citation for that information. This is helpful because if you just give us a works cited section at the end, we don't know what specific information came from where. So we want to know where your information is coming from. When in doubt, cite, okay? If you're, I don't expect you to just make this stuff up. I expect you to do some research. So just when in doubt, give an in-text citation. Remember, no first-person narrative voice. So no I, me, my. This is a formal academic paper. And be sure that you proofread before you submit your paper. If you feel that your writing needs further assistance, you can send your paper through the tutoring online. And this is up here. Let's see, this tab here, you would click on this and then follow the instructions. If you decide that you want to send your paper through tutoring online, I am willing to grant an extension because you would just have to keep in contact with me of when they get that back to you proofread. Remember, they don't necessarily proofread content as much. They're going to be more sentence structure, paper formatting, grammar, all that kind of stuff. Any questions? Please don't hesitate to ask. I'm at your disposal. So we've got our theory application paper due this week. We have our self-portraits, and we have a discussion board. No quiz this week. So have a good week, everyone. Have a good holiday today. And again, if you need help with any of this or just want to bounce some ideas off of me, I am just a text, a phone call, an email away.